I didn't want to be there. Not really. Not because it was my mother's anniversary, we all loved her, and she'd have wanted the family together. Not because of the setting either. The villa we rented for the weekend sat perfectly on the cliffs above the San Diego coast, with warm lighting, long white tables overlooking the Pacific, and caterers who whispered more than they spoke. It was nice, impressive even. I didn't want to be there because something felt off. And it had felt off for a long time. Jenna was beside me, smiling like she always did at these things. Calm, radiant, confident. She had that rare ability to make people feel like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. She touched my arm every now and then, laughed on cue, told little anecdotes about our past vacations that made it sound like we were still that couple people envied. I played along. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration of my mother's legacy. Her philanthropy, her community work, how she somehow held a family of fractured, stubborn professionals together through nothing more than sincerity and handwritten notes. Jenna helped organize the whole thing. In some twisted way, that made what happened next feel worse. It happened during the second course, right as I was explaining to Uncle Dean how we landed the warehouse contract up north. Jenna had just set her wine down when her smartwatch buzzed. Just once, discreet. She didn't react. Not even a flinch. But I looked. I don't even know why. I wasn't snooping. I just caught a glimpse as she lifted her wrist to glance at it. And there it was, just long enough to register. Cole Davis has shared a digital key with you. Room 714, Waterfront Suites. Check-in, 11:15 p.m. tonight. I stopped talking mid-sentence. At first, I thought maybe I read it wrong. Maybe it was a glitch or a reminder from a past trip. But no, I saw Cole's name clear as day. A hotel room, a check-in time. And worse, she didn't even blink. She tapped the screen to dismiss it with the same grace she used when ordering wine, then leaned in toward my cousin Sarah to laugh about something I hadn't heard. Like nothing happened. I looked at her. Really looked. Every part of my brain wanted to believe there was some kind of professional reason for it. Cole was a contractor who worked with our logistics division. Jenna was his point of contact for scheduling and integration. Maybe they had an early meeting? Maybe they were reviewing rollout strategy? Except it was Saturday. There were no meetings, no events scheduled. And if there were, why a room key? I tried to shake it off. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But that part of my mind, the one that had been quietly building cases for weeks, was wide awake now. And it wouldn't let it go. I leaned over, my voice just above a whisper. You meeting Cole tonight? Jenna barely turned. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. What? She asked, sipping from her glass, eyes still on Sarah. Your watch. Popped up. Digital key. Room 714. Cole Davis? Finally, she turned. Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes sharpened, barely, but enough. Babe, she said, in that tone she used when I annoyed her in public. It's a work thing. He's flying out Monday and needs access to the project files we didn't finish last week. We're just syncing up. I said nothing. She tilted her head toward me, voice lower now. Please don't start this. Not tonight. A few seconds passed. Then she smiled wide and tapped her glass, getting everyone's attention. I just want to take a second to celebrate something, she said brightly, her voice carrying over the table. We've all been working hard this year, and despite everything, loss, transitions, the economy, this family continues to thrive. Noah's team just closed a huge deal that's going to change his entire business. Heads turned. My aunts clapped. Someone shouted, "Here's to Noah." I sat there stunned. She was pivoting, redirecting. I didn't even get the chance to say anything before I was holding up a glass and fake smiling through a toast I hadn't prepared. I don't even remember what I said. Just that people laughed and nodded and the moment passed. She had flipped it, like I was the one bringing tension into the evening. After the toast, Jenna leaned in again, brushing imaginary lint off my sleeve. You can bring it up later if you really want to ruin the mood. But for now, let it go. The rest of the dinner blurred. I kept replaying the message over and over in my mind. I thought about the room number. The timing. Cole Davis. A hotel I recognized just 20 minutes from the villa, across from a marina we used to walk through when we were dating. It wasn't random. When the dessert came out, Jenna stood again, this time to show a quick slideshow she'd put together of my mom's community work. Pictures of her volunteering, writing letters, cooking with local kids. It was sweet, real. People cried. I sat there, clapping with everyone else, and felt like I was suffocating. Because while everyone else saw a warm, supportive daughter-in-law paying tribute to the matriarch, I saw someone burying a digital hotel key under a blanket of nostalgia and applause. At one point during the slideshow, Jenna looked over her shoulder and locked eyes with me. Just for a second. Her smile held, but her eyes didn't. There was something cold behind them. Something that said, "You won't do it here. Not in front of them. You'll sit still and you'll play your part." And that's exactly what I did. I clinked glasses with people who praised her organizational *LLS. I listened to her talk about expanding our consulting footprint. I laughed when she brought up family synergy and how her sister might be launching a new wellness brand. The crowd loved it. She was spinning the narrative, and everyone was buying it. I waited for someone else at the table to catch on, maybe see through the performance. But no one did. Or maybe they didn't want to. Why would they? Jenna made it easy to believe everything was fine. And in that moment, the only person who looked out of place, like the one bringing tension to the table, was me. It wasn't until later, when most of the guests had gone home and we were helping clear up glasses from the patio, that I spoke again. "So what time are you meeting him?" She didn't turn, just kept stacking dessert plates into a bin. "I told you already. It's work." At 11:15 p.m. in a hotel. She sighed. Tired now, exasperated. "Noah, it's just easier than finding a neutral space and dragging out meeting rooms. He has documents I need to sign. Can we please not do this tonight? You couldn't sign them during business hours?" She turned then. "If you don't trust me, just say it." I said nothing. She shook her head, forced a smile, and walked inside to drop the dishes. I watched her go, the sway of her dress vanishing behind the patio doors. For a second, I wondered if I was wrong. If maybe, just maybe, there really was some benign explanation. But deep down, I knew better. After that dinner, I didn't say much for a couple of days. I didn't ask Jenna about the hotel room again. I didn't ask if Cole ever showed up. I didn't even bring up the fact that she didn't come to bed until nearly 3 a.m. She said she fell asleep on the downstairs couch, laptop on her chest. Mid-email. That's what she told me the next morning over coffee. Same tone she used when she claimed she forgot to answer my text because her phone died, even though she had charged it next to her bed the night before. Always a detail off, always just plausible enough. I didn't argue. I nodded, pretended to understand. But something in me had shifted. I started watching. And once you start looking, you can't stop seeing. First, it was little things. Her phone always on Do Not Disturb after 7 p.m. Even on weekends. She claimed it was for mental clarity. Some self-help thing she'd picked up from a podcast. I pretended to agree. But the screen would still light up sometimes. Randomly, always flipped face down before I could read it. Sometimes she'd take it into the bathroom with her during dinner. That used to be something we teased each other about. Now, it just made me sick. Then came the cash withdrawals. Jenna hated carrying cash. For as long as I'd known her, she used cards for everything, down to buying a bottle of water. So when I saw 4 separate ATM withdrawals within 2 weeks, $180 here, $240 there, I asked. She said it was for consultations. Business-related, she claimed. A few off-grid mentors she was working with. Apparently, they didn't accept bank transfers. Some people still like to be paid in envelopes, she joked. But when I asked who these people were, she deflected. You wouldn't know them, she said, biting into a protein bar as if that was the end of it. People from a coaching circle. Trust-based referrals. Consultants, right? That same week, I was driving back from a late meeting near the Harbor District. Jenna had said she was at yoga. I passed a small boutique hotel tucked behind an old marina. I only noticed it because I saw a car that looked exactly like hers pulling into the underground parking. I slowed down. It was hers. I know her plates. I bought that car for her birthday 2 years ago. She claimed she was holding Warrior 2 when I asked where she was that night. And maybe she was just not in a studio. The more I looked, the more things started connecting. One afternoon I came home early, hoping to catch her off guard. She wasn't there. I checked her calendar. It said working from home, audit review. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, Slack pinging softly in the background. But no Jenna. She came back almost 3 hours later, holding a yoga mat that was too clean, hair too perfect. Traffic, she said, breezing past me. Class ran long. The kicker? Her wrist was still dry. No sweat, no glow, just lavender mist perfume that didn't smell like her usual one. A few nights later, I went to pour us wine and noticed a small black bag on the floor behind the bar cart. Something about it looked unfamiliar. Inside were receipts from 2 different hotels downtown, both places we'd never stayed at, both dated on Tuesdays and Thursdays over the past month. Times Jenna claimed she had evening workshops. The charges weren't huge, $87, $134, but they weren't for food. They were under room service incidentals, and both had the name Cole Davis printed on the PDF. I didn't confront her, not then. Instead, I started digging. I checked our shared cloud drive, mostly filled with vacation photos and spreadsheets from her side project. But something was off. Her phone had recently unlinked from the shared location tracker we used for planning meetups. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I re-added her. The next day, it was disabled again. A few nights later, I saw her holding 2 phones. One was the iPhone I knew. The other, a thinner device, tucked in her gym bag as she walked past me toward the laundry room. It looked like an older model, maybe a backup. I didn't even know she had it. Later, while she was in the shower, I checked the gym bag. It wasn't there, but the charger was. When I asked her about it, she looked genuinely confused. "What other phone?" I said. "The one I saw in your hand." She laughed. "You're imagining things. Maybe it was my portable charger?" It wasn't, and she knew I knew that. Still, I nodded, because I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. A few days later, a package arrived addressed to Jenna. I assumed it was just another delivery, except it wasn't. Inside was a necklace I'd never seen her wear. Delicate, silver, 2-int asterisk mate for a random self-purchase. The box had no card, but the receipt showed it had been bought at a jewelry store in LA. Paid in cash. I placed the box back carefully and never said a word. Another night, she was out late again. I decided to check her laptop for answers. I wasn't proud of it. But at this point, pride had left the room. The browser history had been wiped. Not just cleared, wiped. Even cookies were disabled. I checked her financial statements next. There were transfers, small ones, every 2 weeks labeled Retainer S. Howard Consulting. The thing is, I work in procurement. I know how to trace shell companies. I ran the name. S. Howard Consulting doesn't exist. But it links, indirectly, to a private P.O. box that has ties to a business entity with Cole Davis listed as a silent director. Even more curious? That business had failed negotiations with my firm just 3 months ago, because they somehow underbid our numbers by 30% on a confidential RFP. An RFP only Jenna and I had access to before submission. That was the moment everything clicked. The lies weren't just personal. They were strategic. Suddenly, the weird gaps in our proposals made sense. The vendor changes. The emails I never received. The contracts pulled at the last minute. Cole wasn't just a guy Jenna was seeing behind my back. He was someone who had something to gain from our company's vulnerabilities. And Jenna? She had access to all of it. She always had. I wish I could say I felt rage in that moment. But I didn't. What I felt was empty, cold. Like I just watched someone fall from a great height and knew they weren't getting up. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It had bled into my professional life. My team, my decisions, my credibility. All this time, I thought she was pulling away because we were growing apart. Now I knew better. She wasn't drifting. She was building a bridge to someone else and burning mine behind her. They say you should trust your gut. That instinct never felt more real than the night I stood outside our guest house, barefoot, holding my phone under the dim porch light, watching the smart lock history load line by line. I already knew what I was going to find. We hadn't used that guest house much lately. Just the occasional visitor, or a quiet place for me to work during the early COVID years. These days, it stayed locked. At least, that's what I believed until I caught a notification in the admin panel of our smart home system. I wasn't even looking for it, really. Just checking thermostat stats for the week. A normal routine. That's when I saw it. Access granted. Guest house door. 12:47 a.m. User J. Read. I blinked at the screen, confused. That was Jenna's code. The one I'd helped her set up years ago. She hadn't used it in months. But now, there it was. Her entry logged, time-stamped, and without any reason she'd ever told me. It was less than a week before the dinner at the villa. I tapped into the system deeper. More entries, 3 in total. All past midnight. All under her profile. I checked the camera feed next. We had 2. One facing the guesthouse door, and another from inside the main house that pointed toward the backyard path. They were motion-triggered with 14-day cloud retention. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I played the clips anyway, thumb hovering over pause. The first frame loaded. It was her, Jenna, wearing a black hoodie, hair pulled up, walking quickly toward the guest house. Behind her, about 3 steps back, was Cole Davis. He kept his head down. No luggage, just his phone and what looked like a thin portfolio under his arm. He followed her without hesitation, like they'd done it before, like this wasn't new. She unlocked the door, held it for him, and they disappeared inside. The timestamp? 12:48 a.m. They didn't leave until morning. The next motion trigger caught Cole walking out just after 6 a.m., stretching his arms like he'd just woken up. Jenna came out 3 minutes later, looking around before slipping back toward the main house. Felt like a slap, not a punch, not the kind of explosion you'd expect from betrayal. It was quieter than that, more surgical, like watching someone you love perform an operation on your memory with gloves on. She had brought him into our home, not just metaphorically. She used her code, walked him through our yard, slept with him on the same property where we toasted anniversaries, grilled on summer nights, watched the dog chase fireflies. I needed more, and I got it. The router logs showed his phone had connected to our Wi-Fi during those hours. Not just as a guest, but as a known device, which meant he'd been there before, possibly more than once. I pulled up the Wi-Fi history, filtering by device name. There it was, Cole__pixel 6, connected under Jenna's profile on multiple dates, always after midnight, always disconnected by morning. She didn't even bother hiding it. On the guesthouse table, in one of the camera frames, I noticed something small paper. I thought at first. I zoomed in as far as the resolution allowed. It was a delivery receipt from a late-night courier service we'd used once for wine during a party. The name printed on the slip was clearly visible. Recipient, Cole Davis. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the night he was there. I checked our shared financial tracker next. Jenna hadn't added anything new in weeks. Her last sync transactions were all from her business card, except for one manual entry marked Wellness Materials, Recurring Fee. It was the same night she had let Cole into the guesthouse. There was nothing wellness about it. That's when I stopped looking for interpretation. The facts were enough now. I didn't need to guess. No more mental gymnastics. No more wondering if it was just emotional, or if it could be explained. I had the access logs, the video, the device connections, the receipt. I even had the silence she carried with her the morning after. The kind of silence that settles in people who know they've crossed a line and are just waiting to see if you'll notice. She kissed me on the cheek that morning, said she had a long client call and wouldn't be back until lunch. I stood there in the kitchen, watching her pour coffee like nothing had changed. But I had changed. I just didn't show it yet. I saved everything to a secure folder, labeled with dates and a backup in the cloud. I wrote notes to myself. Timestamps. Cross-references. I didn't want to forget anything, because soon I would need more than certainty. I would need proof. And not just for me. See, this wasn't just about the affair anymore. That would have been awful enough. But Cole wasn't just some stranger. He was tied to our company. He'd been part of a contract that fell apart mysteriously. And Jenna? She had access to confidential documents, contracts, financial projections. Now that I had video of them together on our property during a period of corporate turbulence, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a compromised partner in a sensitive business ecosystem, which meant this wasn't a personal matter anymore. It was professional and potentially criminal. So I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't break plates or pack a bag. That's not how you win a game this calculated. I waited. I planned. And I started building a folder that would do the talking for me when the time came. The funny thing is, when someone thinks they've gotten away with something, they get lazy. Jenna had become predictable, rehearsed. She used the same excuses in rotation, yoga, networking, last-minute client meetings. And I let her say them all, one after the other, without interruption. I wasn't waiting for her to confess. I was waiting for the right room, the right audience, and the right moment to make sure no one could deny what she'd done. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. With everything. I could have confronted her 100 times before that night. Lord knows I had enough reasons. But I waited. Not because I was scared. I wasn't. I had moved past fear weeks ago. I waited because I knew the weight of what she'd done wouldn't be fully understood unless the right people were in the room. And there's something deeply poetic about revealing betrayal in the exact environment someone used to bury it. Jenna thought she owned that dinner, that villa, that narrative. She didn't realize she'd walked into her own reckoning. The moment came during dessert. A cloudless night, the ocean humming in the background, laughter skipping around the table like it belonged there. Jenna sat 2 seats to my left, surrounded by people who thought they knew her. People who had, just a few nights ago, chuckled along as she deflected my quiet suspicion with jokes about my stress and control issues. She leaned back in her chair, talking animatedly to my cousin about her sister's new wellness brand, a digital detox space, she called it. Blending ancient healing with modern entrepreneurship. I let her finish the sentence. Then I placed the folder on the table. No words, no anger, just the soft thwack of paper on linen, interrupting whatever monologue she was wrapping up. The shift in energy was immediate. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. Someone chuckled nervously, thought it was a speech or a gift. Jenna glanced at me like I had committed a faux pas. "What's that?" she asked, half laughing. "A story," I said quietly. "One I thought I'd share while everyone's here." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just slid the folder forward, opened it with care, and spread out the contents like I was presenting a business proposal. Page 1. Smart lock access logs from our guest house. Multiple late-night entries under Jenna's code. Each timestamped, aligned with the nights she claimed she was on Zoom with Europe. Page 2. Screensh *TS of Cole Davis's digital key, sent directly to her smartwatch. Same time, same hotel, same night as the family dinner. Page 3. Camera stills. Her and Cole walking into the guest house. Him leaving at sunrise. Her returning moments later, expression unreadable. Timestamped, framed. Page 4. Wi-Fi device logs. Cole's phone connected to our network as a known device. Dates aligned with access history. Nights she told me she was at the gym or grabbing drinks with a client from Seattle. Page 5. Financial records. Transfers to a company called S. Howard Consulting. A shell, recently registered. Traced back to a holding entity where Cole was listed as silent director. The same name that showed up during our failed contract negotiation 6 months ago. Page 6. A timeline. A simple chart that overlaid her business dinners, cash withdrawals, and travel receipts with internal activity from my company. Key dates where confidential material was leaked, vendor bids pulled, and proprietary data showed up on a competitor's quote. And then came the final page. Page 7. a non-disclosure and access liability waiver, signed digitally by Jenna 6 months prior. It stated clearly that she accepted full responsibility for device-level access to shared cloud assets. A standard procedure for partners with admin access, something she insisted on having for efficiency. That page was silent proof of guilt, the kind that required no interpretation. The table fell still. No one spoke. Not Jenna. Not her sister. Not the cousin who laughed too loudly earlier when she joked that I didn't know how to relax. Even the servers paused, hovering awkwardly near the edge of the patio with their trays, unsure if they should move. I looked at her. She looked at the documents. I could see it, the moment she recognized that everything she thought was hidden had been cataloged. Time-stamped, cross-checked, not just for me, but for the people around her who once nodded approvingly when she said I was too intense or paranoid. She didn't say anything. Not right away. Her eyes scanned the first few pages, and for a brief second, her fingers twitched like she might try to pull them back. Maybe toss them into the sea, or flip the narrative again. But it was too late. Jenna, I said, calmly, did you want to explain how your digital key ended up linked to Cole's room last Saturday? No response. Or maybe the guest house logs. Or the shell company payments connected to Cole and the contractor who mysteriously underbid us using figures only 3 people had access to. Someone at the far end of the table muttered, Jesus. I leaned back in my chair, looking not at her, but at everyone else. I thought about doing this privately, I said. But since this dinner was used to humiliate me in front of people I care about, it felt fitting to return the favor. Not through theatrics, just through facts. Her father, who'd said nothing all evening, finally broke the silence. Is this real? Jenna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lips moved slightly, but the words never landed. She looked down at the folder like it was a trap she'd just stepped into without seeing the wire. I have copies, I added, digitally time-stamped, backed up. There's more, but I figured this was enough for now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence was louder than anything I could have shouted. Her sister, who'd once called me obsessive in an argument over a weekend trip, suddenly looked nauseous. One of the cousins shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the wine, then back at Jenna. No one laughed this time. No one defended her, because the room knew. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't some emotional husband airing dirty laundry. This was a trail of decisions, of calculated moves, of a betrayal so deliberate that it crossed from personal to professional, from mistake to liability. Jenna, I said one last time, if you have something to say, now's the time. She stared at me, jaw tight, her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles turned white. But she said nothing, not a word. And in that silence, the dinner ended. Not with a toast or a memory or a prayer, but with a folder full of truth and a woman with nothing left to say. The villa cleared out slowly after that. Some left in silence, others with rushed excuses. Early flights, kids at home, emails that suddenly couldn't wait. No one asked me to stop. No one told me I had crossed a line. They just gathered their coats, avoided eye contact, and walked into the night like witnesses retreating from a crime scene. Jenna stayed at the table for a while. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Eventually, her sister walked her inside, eyes glassy with shock. The woman who once called me overbearing now looked like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't sleep that night, not out of grief. The sadness was already gone. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about damage control. The next morning, I met with my company's general counsel. I told him what I had, what I suspected, and why it wasn't just personal anymore. I showed him the guest house footage, the network logs, the timeline overlay. I left out the emotion. That part didn't belong in a boardroom. He listened without interruption. Then he asked one question. Is there any chance this was just an affair? No, I said. There's structure. There's method. Someone used my wife's access to exfiltrate internal data during key points of negotiation. This wasn't just infidelity. This was industrial theft. That got his attention. By that afternoon, a private audit team had been greenlit. Forensics, risk analysts, cybersecurity consultants. We weren't just chasing gossip anymore, we were chasing breach vectors. The deeper they went, the worse it looked. First, they confirmed Cole had accessed our cloud system multiple times, through Jenna's credentials. Her devices were auto-logged into a shared directory where archived contract templates, pricing tiers, and internal strategy docs had been stored. Nothing active, but enough to reconstruct our thinking. The system was secure, but Jenna had invited the breach in. Not maliciously at first, maybe, but negligently, and then possibly deliberately. The timeline was damning. 2 weeks before our bid for a large logistics contract fell apart, Jenna accessed that folder 6 times. 3 of those sessions occurred outside of our office network. Once from a hotel IP, once from the guesthouse Wi-Fi, and once from a mobile hotspot tag to a MAC address not registered under her name. They traced the hotspot. It belonged to Cole. Worse yet, we discovered that the consulting agency tied to Cole as Howard Consulting had quietly signed a pre-agreement with one of our primary competitors just 7 days before the first leak of our documents. The NDA between them wasn't public, but the metadata embedded in the contract file timestamped it. Clear as daylight. I had been wondering why the competitor had suddenly come in under our numbers, right down to decimal margins. Now I knew. They were handed our numbers, handed our playbook, and the person holding the flashlight was sleeping in my house. Further digging revealed something else, something I hadn't seen coming. There was a trust, filed 6 months earlier, registered under Jenna's maiden name. It had a single beneficiary and 2 contractors, listed under temporary assignment clauses. One of those contractors was her sister. The other, a consultant who, upon closer inspection, turned out to be Jenna herself, hidden behind a dummy EIN and a document notarized through a digital portal in Nevada. The trust had received 3 transfers totaling just under $70,000, all broken into amounts below reportable thresholds. The payment origin? A corporate entity adjacent to Cole's consulting firm. Not the firm itself, but a partner organization sharing an address, mailbox, and founding year. It didn't take much imagination to see what had happened. Jenna had created a buffer. She used the trust to move money, used her sister as a contractor to shield the flow, used her position both as my partner and as a back-end system user to leak just enough data to keep Cole's firm ahead in negotiations. The betrayal wasn't accidental. It was engineered. I remember staring at the audit summary, the entire web of connections laid out in front of me. It was like watching the final pieces of a jigsaw fall into place. Not just a picture of infidelity, but of strategy, cover, and intent. I showed the folder to our board 3 days later. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't mention my marriage. I let the audit team present the timeline. Let the investigators explain the shell companies. Let the legal team outline exposure. By the end of the presentation, no one spoke. Then the chairman looked at me and said, "How deep are you in this personally?" I answered honestly, too deep not to respond, not deep enough to be compromised. They nodded. The motion to escalate the breach to our insurers passed unanimously. Our competitor was to be notified. A formal demand for a forensic copy of any material obtained through Cole's firm was issued immediately. And pending their response, litigation was already drafted. My inbox lit up the next morning with legal memos, HR briefings, and asset freeze recommendations. Meanwhile, Jenna's world was unraveling fast. The devices in her name, laptop, phone, work tablet were placed under administrative freeze. Our cyber risk team obtained legal approval to image her hard drives under spousal business protection clauses. She was put on immediate leave from her consulting projects. One of her clients, upon learning about the investigation, suspended their contracts, pending further review. Her sister received a formal inquiry letter from the IRS the same day. Jenna texted me that night, "We need to talk. I never wanted this to go so far." I didn't respond. The irony didn't escape me. 4 months. She silenced me with misdirection. And now silence was all she was going to get. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, of trust, of control, of the parts of my life she'd quietly handed off to someone else in exchange for leverage I never saw coming. What started as betrayal had become something more dangerous. A breach of integrity so profound it collapsed the line between the personal and the professional. And all of it, hidden behind curated smiles, yoga mats, wellness weekends, and late-night client calls that never really happened. The worst part? She never thought I'd catch on. She never thought I'd connect the dots. But I had. Every single one.